You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Wednesday, the 29th of November.
I'm Jessie Stevens.
I'm Mia Freedman.
I'm Holly Wainwright.
I was meant to be in the studio with my two favourite people today, but there is a storm lashing where I live, as I know that is for lots of Out Louders, actually. A lot of the East Coast is being slammed, and I couldn't even get to the city. So if I sound a bit weird and you can hear a storm raging behind me, that's why.
On the show today, your vagina will be different, your face swells, children are noisy. All the reasons one woman doesn't want to have kids has gone absolutely viral. Plus, one brand is airbrushing stretch marks onto their models now. Progress or nonsense? And consent at hens and bucks parties. We unpack one very tricky dilemma. But first,
in case you missed it, Bruce Lerman and Brittany Higgins are back in a courtroom this week. And if you've glimpsed headlines discussing what did or didn't happen in Parliament House in March 2019, you could be forgiven for asking, didn't this case already happen? Yes, it did. So to get you across what you're seeing now, here's a quick breakdown. It's a civil case where Bruce Lerman, who's the former Liberal staffer who, in a case that's become one of the most famous in our history, was accused of sexually assaulting Brittany Higgins, a charge he has always strenuously denied. And now he's suing Network 10 and journalist Lisa Wilkinson for defamation. He's already settled similar cases out of court with the ABC and with news media. Defamation is the act of slandering someone, of ruining their reputation. And Lerman claims that's what happened to him when 10 ran a now infamous interview with Higgins in February 2021. Wilkinson interviewed Higgins about her claim that she was raped by Lerman at Parliament House and that senior people in the then government knew about it. And in the interview, she did not name Lerman. 10 say this was more about looking at what the government did or didn't do in the face of this allegation. That case went to court and after a protracted period was declared a mistrial in December 2022 over juror misconduct. But the thing about a defamation case is that the events do have to be re-prosecuted to a point in order to show that damage was done and that truth was not fully explored or agreed upon. As we're recording this today, Brittany Higgins is on the stand. For the last few days, it's been Lerman up there, which is something we haven't seen before, as he didn't have to be cross-examined in the original trial. Some of the facts that have come out of that testimony are that Lerman's rent is being paid by Channel 7 and will be paid in full for 12 months in relation to the interviews he did for them earlier this year on their Spotlight News programme. It's moving quickly, this story, and there are going to be a whole lot more headlines out of it. But for now, a case that has unquestionably altered the lives of all of those involved, including Lerman, Wilkinson, and of course, Brittany Higgins, whose mental health was deemed so fragile that this could not be retried in a criminal court, are all back on the splash of every news site and broadly being treated as entertainment.
There are many reasons why you should or should not have kids. It requires a huge deal of sacrifice, compromise, and patience. And yet, not everyone feels comfortable admitting that they prefer to avoid such trouble by simply not becoming a parent.
over the weekend, an Australian actress and model named Emeline Gonzalez shared a post on Instagram with the caption, "Why I Don't Want Kids." For context, Gonzalez has been in a relationship for 15 years and says she is asked about children constantly. Whenever she provides a short, concise reason for why she wants to remain child-free, she says her response is treated as not good enough and people continue to prod. So she decided she would share the list of 117 reasons, which she has in her notes app, to her 1.2 million followers. And here are some of those reasons. It's harder to move with kids. Terrible twos. There will never be a break from parenting. Children can lead to relationship breakdowns. They range from big things like that to relatively smaller things. For example, you're more susceptible to yeast infections while pregnant, that is a fact, and postpartum hair loss. Speaking to Mamamia, she said, "I know some of the things on there might be insignificant compared to what a child might bring. And are some of them vain? Sure. But lots of these fears and thoughts are real and resonate not only with me, but with so many other women. A lot of them are small things that contribute towards a much bigger picture." She also said she is absolutely not telling others not to have children or judging anyone for their own decision. And yet, here's a really surprising bit. People got really mad about her list. There were countless messages and comments criticising her and telling her, I quote, what a horrible and broken person she is. Look, the three of us have children, but what struck me was how spot on her list is. Holly, did you have any points you wanted to add to her list?
I think it was very comprehensive. I am not here to argue with her. I think that almost everything she said was true.
It sounded very reasonable, like a pros and cons list. I was like, yeah, these are all valid.
I think that what this post actually shows us, and the reaction to it actually shows us, is the lengths a woman has to go to explain a choice not to have children in 2023 is so ridiculous. It is still seen as a really controversial choice, a really selfish choice, a sort of petty choice. I mean, of course, some of the things on this list are very petty. And as we've discussed before, one of the reasons why you can't express really why the best reason to have children is what it is. It's because it's mushy and esoteric. It's about love, really, that you can't really express. But I think that although, of course, some of these reasons are petty, I entirely understand why she felt the need to make this comprehensive list, because we do not respect women's decision not to have children. We just say, that's so selfish, or you'll change your mind, or whatever, and then we decide she's not really a proper person.
I don't want to should be a full sentence. But
Exactly.
I really liked her point that it's not, and that, okay, so my one reason, which might be, I don't want to be pregnant. Say that's one reason, and then someone tries to talk you out of it, and then there's another reason, and that's not enough. I just love that she had to come up with 117, all of which are verified. I also thought, looking at them, that parenting, and I've been thinking this for a while, has a PR problem. I don't think parents are selling it. I think that...
Fight me, Jessie Stevens.
I think I've quoted it before, a Rob Delaney thing. He writes about it and says the tiredness and the sickness, you know what that feels like, but there's something inexpressible. This woman doesn't feel about your kid what you feel about your kid. I think that's why people feel attacked, because they look at their children and they're like, but look at them. To Ellie and to anyone else, your child is a snotty-nosed, nappy-filled stranger. But to you, they're...
burden.
Exactly.
No, not to you, they're a burden.
Yeah.
To anyone else, they just seem like a burden. I loved every single point. I had a red pen and I ticked every single of the 117. I could write 117 more, and yet we still do it. So I guess...
And very few people give them back.
It's hard to put that in a list, but I'm going to try to make one, because... Isn't it interesting that all of these reasons and hundreds more are so valid? It really doesn't look good on paper.
No,
this
it looks
parenting
terrible.
caper.
No.
And so how good must it be that we still do it? I can understand if you just have one, right? Because then it can be like, oh, shit, I didn't know all this stuff. I didn't know how bad it was going to be. But anyone that has more than one child has gone back for more. And I would keep going back if I could, despite all of these things. I would have 100 children if I could. I would give birth every single day if I could. I would be pregnant all of the time if I could. I just would.
But how much better is it that you look back on generations where there was no choice and there was only one path, and there were a lot of people who had kids who probably hadn't thought about it, or it wasn't a conscious decision, or in fact their lives would have been better if they didn't have them?
But look how she has to justify it. I think it's such an interesting idea. And I think with nothing else other than parenting is such a weird thing, because you don't find men spending a lot of time persuading each other to change their minds about something. But women, parenting women, are always so evangelical. It's like, you've got to breastfeed, or, oh, just do formula, or controlled crying, or not controlled crying, and because I think ultimately we're all so insecure about our choice that we feel like we need to convince someone else. In my brother's friendship group, there were a whole bunch of couples. They all had kids, and one of them just really, really didn't want to have kids, and he was the only one that didn't, and he was married. And it was an interesting thing to watch happen in the friendship group, because all the couples with kids became really defensive, like, are we making our lives look this bad? Like, do our lives look this bad to you? And they kept trying to be the PR, like, we're happy, it's really worth it.
Genuine question though, do you think you could write 117 reasons why you should have kids? Like, are there that many reasons?
I'm going to try.
I think you only really need to write one, because I think that as we've said, and I think I did write this story years ago, is it's what you can't express. As you've said, Jessie, it's what you can't really express until you've done it. But I reiterate, I have a lot of friends who don't have kids, who decided not to have kids. I do not live in a world that only is full of people with children. And they are not allowed to just have that choice. They are not allowed. They have to justify it at every turn. People want to pity them when they don't want to be pitied, or they don't want to pity them when they do actually need to be pitied, as in they go like, oh, it must be amazing to be able to lie in every Saturday morning when that person maybe did really want to have children. It's a complicated thing. You said before, Jessie, isn't it so much better than previous generations where women didn't have choice? They do have choice, but this is still a choice that we refuse to really validate or understand.
I'm evangelical about it because I'm just like, look, I know it looks really bad on paper. I know that. I was listening to Ryan Shelton on The Imperfects. He was talking about how he was on the fence about having children and he thought maybe he didn't want to have children. And his co-hosts who have little kids were trying to say that it was great, but they weren't really trying to convince him because guys don't really do that.
They were accepting of his choice.
But I texted him and I'm like, come on, mate, get the splinters out of your ass. It's the best thing you'll ever do and you'll be an amazing dad.
Okay,
Why
but
did I feel the need to do that? I think because I didn't want him to miss out because I know it looks bad on paper, but it's so fucking great.
But if someone says to me, you have to go to Peru, people do this about travel all the time. You have to go to Peru. And it's
I hate that.
I'm not particularly interested in Peru, but you should go to Peru because of X, Y, Z. I don't want to go.
So true. And they know how good Peru is because they've been there, right?
Yeah.
And they can't convey that to you.
And maybe if I went to Peru, it would be great.
I think you don't come back
to go to Peru.
You then might come back and convince me. So isn't it my duty, if I care about you and I want you to be happy, to say, I think this could enhance your life so much? I don't actually agree with this, but my friend said that the biological clock, after your 40s, your early 40s, people used to stop trying to encourage you to do it. Or if you didn't have a partner, people would stop trying to encourage you to do it. And so she said, no, now that you can do a surrogate and you can have donor eggs and you can do a single mother, now all of those things are options.
Yeah.
She's 50 and people are still like, it's not too late. And she's like, leave me alone.
And same-sex couples used to be left alone.
Yep.
Now they're not left alone either. It's
Yep.
there are options. It's like, leave everyone alone to live their life. We asked people in the office who haven't had kids some of their reasons maybe to remain child-free or why they're not really being sold. And here's what they told us.
I'm afraid of a lot of it, but I'm really afraid I'll make the wrong choice. I'll do it at the wrong time. What if I do it with the wrong person? What if I resent my child? There's so many what ifs, so it's just, it's really terrifying to make a decision about something that's so final.
I'm really scared to bring kids into this world because I feel like I'm a really selfish person and I don't have what it takes to be a selfless mother. And I feel like that is what parenting is all about.
I guess when I look at my future, I just don't really see kids in it. I've never really been a kid person. I'm not a fan of the screaming. I know they grow up, but I just don't really see kids in my future, and I'm okay with that.
I've just been listening to my friends who have had children for the past, 10 years, and it sounds terrifying, and I don't know if I'm ready for my life to fully change just yet. And I know it is a big change and I know there's positives, but I am nervous for it to change. I'm also in that window where I have to do it in the next 3 years, and the deadline kind of terrifies me.
So I want kids and I'm not scared of having kids, but I am scared of childbirth. I just feel like, yes, you don't have any control of what's going on. I'm scared of hospitals, I'm scared of surgeries, just not being able to know what's going to happen, what the outcome's going to be, how it affects you, how it affects your child. It's crazy just not knowing what's going to happen in childbirth.
Mamamia out loud!
An American underwear brand has been accused of photoshopping the models in its ads, which does not sound like breaking news or anything we would talk about in 2023 because, duh. But here's the twist, Outlouders. The allegation is that they photoshopped stretch marks onto a model who didn't have them. I was waiting for shocked noises. but they never came.
Gosh, Mia, that sounds wild. Why would they do that?
I agree. The company, which is called Negative Underwear, started in 2014. And when it was started by a woman called Marissa Vosper, she and her co-founder decided not to retouch women's bodies in the marketing materials. And that was pretty revolutionary. I mean, come on. 2014 was not quite the height of Victoria's Secret, but it was still that era. And they called the move at the time a no-brainer, and they said it benefits a business that sells, mostly sheer and wireless and ultra-minimal bras to women, and they didn't want to put themselves in a position where there'd be Photoshop fails, the ones that go viral on social media where, oops, someone's missing their belly button or they've got an extra leg or
they've clearly got some skin from their cheek and put it under their arm so there are no hair follicles.
Exactly. Now, a recent ad of theirs featured a close-cropped photo of a woman's breasts in this negative bra ad, and it showed these delicate stretch marks that were whispering across her chest. And some people who saw the picture, they weren't upset about the stretch marks, but they said the stretch marks themselves seemed too pretty and too uniform. So they called bullshit on the stretch marks. And people on social media alleged that perhaps the stretch marks themselves were actually airbrushed on. And people said things like, there's no way her stretch marks are that perfect.
This would be so good in a book. Sorry, go on, Mia.
It would, or perhaps on a TV show. The company denies it, I should say that. Sometimes you just have to stop and appreciate progress, because when you go onto like the Skims website or pretty much any underwear brand and all the smart fashion brands, there are women of all different shapes, sizes. There are stretch marks. It's glorious. Skin shades, different heights, ages. It's divine, right? But I learnt a new term, and it is called gateway flaw, because the critics of these stretch marks, who say that they don't think they're real, they say brands are using this as a cynical way to make their brand seem more relatable to women. And this idea of stretch marks being a gateway flaw.
It's a safe place to start.
Exactly.
Okay, I have a theory about why stretch marks are okay, right? Because there are lots of flaws that lots of people have, but stretch marks have become more ubiquitous. They're in marketing and even on social media and all that kind of stuff.
Do you have stretch marks?
I've got some, but I had a lot more during adolescence and I grew out of them.
Holly, do you have stretch marks?
Yeah, I do. I got them from my second pregnancy mostly on my stomach. They're quite significant, friends. They are.
Fun fact, it's said to be genetic. I don't have stretch marks and my mum doesn't have stretch marks.
Well, that's the thing, right, is that there are lots of lotions and goos that say that they will fix stretch marks, but they're actually caused from something under the skin, so nothing you put on, which is my point. Are we accepting of stretch marks because there is no solution to sell us? If there was something really easy.
But there is a solution to sell us, which is stretch mark cream. You just said it.
No, it doesn't work.
No,
everyone
but
has accepted
the
beauty industry has widely accepted, particularly in the last 5 years, when we've, had podcasts and this proliferation of stuff on beauty. It is generally accepted. If you know anything about beauty, you go, there's really not much you can do about stretch marks. You can get them lasered, but even that, people know it's quite painful, it's expensive, and often it doesn't work. So with that said, are we accepting stretch marks because there is no way that we can commercialize the solution? Something like wrinkles aren't being the sign of body positivity because we can sell them injectables.
I don't think it's that. I think it's that since smart brands have worked out that authenticity, in inverted commas, sells, now it's not cool to be too perfect. So if you've shot a beautiful young model and you suddenly think, oh, she's going to alienate everybody, I know, let's make her a little bit more accessible. Stretch marks are a good way to do it. You're probably not going to add flesh, like make them look bigger. Stretch marks are kind of something that you can add that's a little bit, I wanted to say inoffensive, but it might be the wrong word. But as you say, a gateway flaw to go, yeah, she's one of us, in a way. And I think it's really interesting that that's what we demand now. We're demanding that you're one of us. And the other thing about stretch marks is I used to believe that you only got them from pregnancy because I didn't see them around, right? And then I realized, oh no, young women have stretch marks, old women have stretch marks, people who aren't mothers have stretch marks. Stretch marks themselves have had a complete kind of image rebrand over the past decade, I'd say too. And I totally understand why a brand would want to make themselves look more authentic, even if they're not.
I think what's interesting about the idea of stretch marks, and again, you always follow the money, right? Stretch marks like Holly said, you can be young, you can be old, you can be different nationalities, you can be different sizes. It's not just about women of a certain size.
I read something that said if you run into someone, it is more likely that they have stretch marks than they are a coffee drinker. That's how unalienating stretch marks are.
But also, don't you think that even the most beautiful women in the world now, and when I say that, I mean stereotypically beautiful, have to say, oh, I'm not as perfect as you think I am. I've definitely got some cellulite on my bum, or, you should see me when my hormonal pimples break out. You have to be inhuman, which is good. It's good. It's progress. But I feel like stretch marks are kind of a small thing that you can admit is a little flaw.
Yeah. When 50 to 90% of women have stretch marks and something like 40% of men have them. So most people are walking around with stretch marks. But I was reading something that said that in ancient Egypt, they found an example of a little jar of cream to use for stretch marks. From the beginning of time, we have demonized them because they've been so related to women and femininity. But I do believe that it's a tiny little crumb that we're being given.
Yes and no. I always say, well, what's the alternative? You know how people are like, oh, people are just using stretch marks to be relatable and it's cynical marketing. I'm like, okay, let's just imagine that it is cynical marketing. Isn't that better than the cynical marketing that we've had up until
you're right.
2 seconds ago, which was let's make women feel insecure by displaying only these completely unrealistic images of women's faces and bodies that only exist on a computer?
If you want to make Out Loud part of your routine 5 days a week, we release segments on Tuesdays and Thursdays just for Mamamia subscribers. To get full access, follow the link in the show notes, and a big thank you to all our current subscribers.
I've got a dilemma column these days. It's called Don't Freak Out, and you can email any of your dilemmas to me. Well, the link to do that is in the show notes. But I got one this week I just need to talk to you two about, because I don't think I have the solution here to this dilemma. It's quite the ride.
You're the worst agony aunt then.
Yeah, she's delegating her job to us.
I know.
I need you two to help me. So here we go. Not me, obviously, our anonymous dilemma haver. My eldest daughter will be getting married soon, and this weekend was her fiancé's bucks party. On Friday night, his mates organised a stripper for him at the accommodation they'd booked. He said he was in bed and they dragged him out to be part of it, which he reluctantly did. During the stripper's act, she laid him down, got him to hold a dildo, which she was penetrated with. My daughter had a feeling something was the matter, as she hadn't heard from him all Friday night or Saturday morning. He knew that she was uneasy about there being a stripper involved in the weekend. The mates had given them the heads up, and she thought he would have at least messaged to reassure her that everything was okay. On Saturday, she made contact with him to find out what was going on. That's when he told her about it. He was quite abrupt about it, saying he was drunk and that his mates egged him on, and what was he supposed to do? Since then, my daughter has spiraled. She feels hurt and betrayed and constitutes the act as cheating. Is that cheating? He is extremely upset and remorseful, but only because, in his words, I feel terrible that she feels I've let her down. That's not really taking ownership or apologising, is it? Says our dilemma haver. For context, she's 29, he's 31. They've bought a house together and have been thriving with regards to careers, goal setting, and living a happy, healthy lifestyle. She is now saying that she might be considering calling the whole thing off. I'm devastated that this stupid act could ruin all of it. Any advice, Holly? I'm throwing any advice, Mia.
I don't know who we're giving advice to, right? Because we're
giving advice to the mother-in-law.
The mother-in-law, it doesn't really matter what she does. But I think this is such an interesting dilemma because, look, I'm just going to say it. I think there's a real issue with consent on bucks nights and hens nights. It hasn't caught up to the way life has changed and ideas have changed. I mean, think of any other situation where without your knowledge or explicit consent, someone comes and sits on your lap, does a lap dance, touches you, ties you up, all of these things. And I know that recently there was a guy, took out legal action against a stripper from his bucks night. I think he was the buck. Or he was at the buck night.
That.
Yeah, because she penetrated him with a dildo and he had not consented to that. Now, there is no consent pretty much on Bucks and Hens night, and that's kind of the point. The consent is implied because the friends organise it. I noticed that there's like quite a sense, particularly on Bucks nights, a sense of glee in the way that the men do it, and it's almost like a ritualised humiliation. I don't know. I can't get my head around it.
It feels like it's getting worse as the rules and consent and women being clearer about boundaries. It feels like Bucks nights are getting worse because they are the chaos to our order.
Yeah.
It feels as though that's the one night that they feel as though, yeah, we're being made to behave like this. So tonight we're going to throw all those rules out and become completely debaucherous.
Mentality on those nights, isn't it?
It is, but I have a very strong opinion on this. I think it was a stupid mistake, but I don't think she should call off the wedding.
Oh, no.
I don't think she should call off the wedding. I think that what happened here is he had his Bucks night. It was a stupid mistake and he shouldn't have done it. But I have heard, I am of the age where there is a Bucks night every couple of weekends. And the stories I have heard from people, it is that pack mentality, and it's like they want them to do wilder and wilder things because of the glee of everyone around them. So there is the encouraging of the stripper to do things to the man, or the man there holding something and then the stripper. I'm not trying to blame anyone necessarily, but I think that what's happened is that the whole thing has become carried away. I don't constitute it as cheating, to be completely honest. I don't.
Oh, my God. I don't constitute it as cheating, but I entirely understand why she's spiraling. Entirely understand. Because I entirely agree with you, Mia. It's so strange and hypocritical and such a throwback that we just accept, oh, Bucks nights get out of control. But men are not powerless, even when they're drunk, in fact. Men are not powerless to say no. They're not powerless to say, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. You know, we talk all the time about how the only thing that can change men's behavior is other men, and being told it's not cool, it's not okay. And that might make you look like a boring dude sometimes who's not one of the boys and isn't going along with the gag and, oh, what are you? You know, a girl or whatever. But it's the only thing that changes anything. And I really relate to, it's definitely happened to me in my life, where you look at your partner and you go, oh, you're not quite who I thought you were. If you knew that I was really uncomfortable with that, and I'm sorry if I sound like a massive prude, but like there's strippers and then there's penetrating someone with a dildo. If I've made it really clear to my partner that I don't want to do that and he doesn't really want to do that either, and then he's like, oh, but you know, whatever, no big deal. I'm a bit like, well, what else do you do that you don't tell me about?
All right, devil's advocate, let's say she's on her hens. All her friends are there and they're cheering on the male stripper, and the male stripper comes and he takes his pants off and he grabs her hands and puts them on his penis, right? And it becomes this sexual thing that she didn't really instigate but has happened. Who's at fault there?
It's not that I think it's at fault. If you really don't want to do that kind of stuff and you say to your friends, I don't want to do that kind of stuff, you are also allowed to say in the moment, I don't want to do that kind of stuff.
Hang on a second. She clearly hasn't been to too many Bucks and Hens, because what about alcohol? How can you consent to something or object to something when there's every chance that by that point when the stripper arrives, you are wasted and you are not able to make decisions. And often with these things, you have to sit on a chair, they handcuff your hands behind your back. Like, what do you do?
I get all that, and I have been to them. I don't buy alcohol as an excuse for bad behavior. Like, I just don't, right? Not at this level, not for men.
So just for women, because with coercion...
No, I'm talking about consent. I'm not talking about bad behavior.
Not just for women. But what I mean is, I understand why this woman is now looking at her partner a little bit differently after that night. I totally get it. I'm not obviously going to say why I think she should call off the wedding or not, but what's telling about this dilemma is it comes from the mother-in-law. She doesn't really think she should call off the wedding. She says she thinks her daughter is spiraling. But if her daughter is spiraling, listen to your instincts.
Oh, no.
It's her mother
Brides
who's
are
saying...
emotional. Do I sound like I'm making excuses? Brides are highly emotional.
It's her mother who's saying they've got a lovely house, they've got really good career goals, blah, blah, blah. They could have all those things and her husband could still be a dick.
I don't think he is a dick, and I reckon that coercion works both ways. And when I read this story, I see a man who was coerced. in the same way a woman was coerced.
Well, wouldn't he say, of course he was coerced?
Well, wouldn't a woman say, of course she was coerced?
But we're not talking about a woman. We're talking about this guy. What I mean is I understand the ick feeling you get inside yourself when you look at him and go, I thought you hated all that, but you clearly don't. What else are you doing? I get it. And I think sometimes you've got to listen to your ick.
Outlouders, what do you think? Are we calling off the wedding? Are we not? It's a complicated situation, isn't it?
I've got a recommendation, which is for a show that's on ABC iView called Take 5. Now, lots of Outlouders will already watch this show, right? It's hosted by Zanro, who's a really iconic DJ on the ABC. And I think it's the second season. It might even be the third that's on at the moment. And they are short shows where basically she talks to a legendary musician and gets them to choose 5 of their favourite tracks, their favourite songs, the songs that made them, whatever. And the one I'm recommending is one that will just lift our spirits at a difficult time because it is with our collective boyfriend, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who, of course, wrote Hamilton, as well as the songs in Moana, the songs in Encanto, many of the famous songs that we and our children sing all the time. Anyway, he chooses 5 songs. They're very diverse. They range from rap songs to Latin classics to Queen and David Bowie.
Did you say David Bowie?
I always say David Bowie.
Wowie.
I grew up that way. It's
Jessie,
Bowie.
how do you say
Bowie.
it? It's David Bowie.
You're correct. He's called Bowie, but I always call him Bowie, and that's how it will be for me. Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is an icon, has been very famous for a very long time, still brings, when he's talking about music, this like boyish enthusiasm. He can't stand still.
I grew up one neighborhood over from hip hop as it was being born. It's always been the most exciting storytelling genre to me, full stop. And Biggie is like one of the best storytellers in this genre of storytellers.
It's just a reminder of that pure joy and passion that people have for the things they really love.
I love him.
Even though he's so successful, he still exudes from every pore. I loved it. Take 5 with Lin-Manuel Miranda, Zanro on ABC iView.
You know, who's watching The Crown? Jessie, have you watched it yet?
No, I still haven't watched an episode.
Okay. Holly and I have watched The Crown. I know a lot of Outlouders have watched The Crown, and we spoke about it a little bit on the show last week, but my Lord, I had so much more to say. And even Jessie had a lot to say having not watched it. We made a subs episode about it. The conversation was really, really interesting. Is the portrayal of Princess Diana's story still too fresh for dramatisation? We discussed so many things, including my personal feelings about Diana. A link to that must listen episode is in the show notes. I just can't get enough. I just want to talk about it a lot.
Thank you for listening to Australia's #1 news and pop culture show. We so appreciate you being here. This episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. The assistant producer is Tahli Blackman, and there's been audio production by Leah Porges. Bye.
Bye. Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There's a link in the episode description.